So, a lot of excitement there, waiting for the 49ers to come in.
What kind of question is that? What kind of question is that?
Are you excited?
Oh, yeah, there's clouds gathering out on. Oh, sorry about that question, Troy.
Would have been a lot more had they not had the worst offseason in the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's always good to see something different.
Troy, we talked earlier about Emmanuel Sanders and the fact he's got a hamstring and he's only practiced he's practiced very little and he hasn't played in a preseason game. Is Emmanuel Sanders going to play at all in the preseason?
I'm not sure. I talked to him. I'm filing that story. I left the story to come on the show. I talked to Emmanuel today. He just said it's day-to-day. The expectation from Gary Kubiak is that Emmanuel will practice this week. You know, will he play in the preseason? I don't know. I would not expect to see him play this week. But then, so the issue is, would you play him in the final preseason game when the starters likely aren't going to play? So there's a possibility. The possibility exists he won't play in the preseason, which I think that's the right call. If you don't think he's ready this week, then he sits out for the preseason.
Troy, we talked earlier, and this was based on a conversation Les and I had yesterday when he said, what was the weakest link of the Broncos? I'm paraphrasing. And I said defensive line. That I don't know about Antonio Smith yet. I don't know about, the fact that they're missing one of their starters for 4 games. You got a rookie because of Austin Jr. being put on IR. Tell me about the defensive line and whether or not it's a weak or a strong link.
Well, it's a concern until it's not. And Darius Kilgo's the rookie you're talking about who's really stepped up, and Siono Faiui, who they claimed off waivers, is going to get a chance to make this team with Marvin Austin essentially cut. I mean, they're going to probably reach an injury settlement with him at some point, but he's out for the year regardless. So they're thin there. They lack depth. But the issue is where I'm not panicking and I'm reserving judgment is Wade Phillips schemes in such a way that he could protect that defensive line through some blitzes, zone blitzes, safety blitz if they have to control the run. That's the issue. Are they going to get gored and gashed on running plays? Right now, Sylvester Williams has had by far the best camp of his career. He's at a crossroads. So, Woody, if he takes the next step forward, suddenly the defensive line looks, not formidable, but looks functional. If he doesn't play up to expectations, then I would agree with you. It's a concern because Antonio Smith's probably in his last season of his career. Kilgo's in his first season. And up to this point, Sylvester Williams has not met expectations.
Let's talk about Laux, Norwood, Fowler. Who's going to merge? I mean, they're looking for, it seemed like Bubba kind of, you called him the cockroach, and I stole that from you, but it seemed like Bubba just hangs around. But out of that crowd, who do you think could emerge?
I still think Fowler makes the team. Now, he didn't have a great game this last week. He just nothing he did really jumped out like he did earlier. But for me, Fowler's upside, if all things are equal, I would go with Fowler. Caldwell rallied, as he always is. He's very skilled at making the roster for a reason. He's dependable. He knows the plays. He had a huge play last week, so he remains in the mix. Jordan Norwood has a much more of a chance than I think we realize, only because if Emmanuel Sanders is limited in any way early in the season, Norwood is kind of that same type of player that you can use out of the backfield, reverses. He's a true slot guy with his size and quickness. So don't write off Jordan Norwood. He has not looked impressive at all in special teams, which is how he's going to make it last year. But Norwood, for me, might even be ahead of Fowler right now, depending on the Sanders injury. But I'd say, between that group, I still think Fowler has the edge right now over Caldwell. And so it would be Fowler and Norwood. But that's as we sit here today, Woody. They clearly have not decided on that group, and those 3 guys have to continue to perform. This week could be, it could go to the end with those guys, but this week could be very telling for those 3 players.
Well, Troy, you also mentioned 3 guys there who have been fielding punts in training camp, yet we still don't know who the favorite is. Who would you bet on to become the Broncos' punt returner once the regular season starts?
If I sit here today, I would say it's Omar Bolden. That would be the conservative choice and punts. Now, kicks, he's a pretty electric kick returner.
Yeah.
But as of now, he's in the slight lead I just don't see how Corbin Lukes could make it as just a punt returner if he's not better than some of those other receivers we mentioned. Norwood can return punts, and it would not shock anyone if we see him back there again. I think there would be some reservation if they don't want to get him hurt if they're not sure what they've got going with Sanders in the hammy. So right now, if you're asking, I'd say it would be Bolden. But that, I mean, you know how it is, guys. That could be week 1, like the 5th starter. He makes 1 start, and then he gets replaced week 2. So I would write nothing in stone with punt return. Kick return, Bolden is clearly the guy.
Give me your grades for Peyton Manning and the offensive line from the other night.
Peyton is just uneven. It's just unfinished. He needed more time, and those 2 third-down drops really colored his line. If Virgil and that Virgil Green holding call, they were over the 40, they were moving, they were in rhythm. All of a sudden, Virgil gets called for holding, and that drive completely stalled. But unfinished. I'm not worried about Manning. With the offensive line, 2 things, and you wrote about this too, Woody. A, they were showing that Manning wasn't getting hit, albeit without J.J. Watt in there. And all of their guys graded out well in run blocking, according to Pro Football Focus. In particular, what's impressive is the trending upward of Matt Paradis, the center. And Gary Kubiak has praised him repeatedly, both as a leader, his communication skills along the line, and frankly, he's playing well. His grades this entire preseason have been, for a young guy, kind of off the charts. So I would say they showed improvement in the second string line, rebound, and showed improvement. But and Gary Kubiak, we asked him today, Woody, have you settled on the offensive line? And he said, the group's still the same. He wasn't prepared to say that's going to be the group on opening day, but it's clearly looking that way. Now, again, keep an eye on the guard position, because if Max Garcia were to struggle, I think that's the easiest place they could address it through trade. They're not going to trade for a new tackle or a center. That's not happening. But if they think they're too young on that offensive line, the one route they could take a look at is at guard.
I watched the offensive line for most of the first quarter, trying to get a gauge on them, and I saw some good run blockers in for this system, and I was trying to wonder, Troy, because I watched the old Broncos when Terrell Davis and that they've got the veteran presence on the right side. So do you run on the left side because of how important the backside is when you make the cut and they seal the blocks on the other side? Or is it better to run behind those guys on the right side and hope that they free into the second level? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the personnel you're facing, but I understand what you're saying. The seal on the backside is what creates that gash run where you cut the field in half, and you see how Hillman in particular has really timed it with putting his foot in the ground and running right behind the crease, right into that as the crease opens, which we all know Terrell Davis did better than anyone here. But it depends on personnel, because there are times that just running through guys works as well. And Howard Griffith told me in regard to that, the former fullback with the Broncos during the time with Davis, is that backside is so important. And they got so good at it because Howard functioned almost as an offensive lineman and would freelance on plays to pick guys off on the backside. And as they grew together as a line, it's like improvising during the play with the fullback functioning as a lineman. So I would say the backside, as they get better, will be the key, being able to run through. But initially, it's just Mark Schlereth told me it's the best way. It's like if every one of them does the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. It's right if they all do it together. They're chains in a link in a fence. That offensive line is built to move together. So if they all do the wrong thing, it's still the right play. And that's when that backside still opens. But Hillman in particular, Woody, is showing that if you get untime that backside, that's that 8, 9, 10, 11-yard gain.
You wrote, my final question, Troy, and thank you for spending time with us, but you wrote about Ronnie Hillman. We tend to forget he came in the league at 20 years old. He was the youngest player in the league for a couple of years, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's almost like
he's still only 23, isn't he?
Yeah, it's like Gary Kubiak sort of turned the light on, that he maybe, based on what you're writing, he maybe is getting it now?
Well, there's no question that in the past they've said similar things to Ronnie Hillman, and the light bulb flickered and didn't stay on. And part of it was immaturity. Even he said yesterday when I asked him, he said in a kind of funny way, things that were important to me before aren't important to me now. And you can draw your own conclusions, whether that's living the life of a player, video games, anything. He's just really focused on his job. And Gary Kubiak had a conversation with him early in camp, Woody, and pulled him inside and said, you got to finish plays better. There's more there. And in the past, I don't think Hillman thinks much of that. It's like, yeah, whatever. Maybe he has one good practice and goes back to what he was doing. That message this past month resonated, and he has been impressive. And I know Gary Kubiak wants a bell cow back. That is his preference, but he sees something in Hillman as a home run threat, change of pace guy that, Gary Kubiak is nothing if not versatile in his play calling. His offense is simple, but when he's had a great receiver, that receiver's led the league. When he's had a great running back in Foster, he led the league. And Matt Schaub led the league in passing one year. Gary Kubiak will adjust. So, keep an eye on how they'll use Hillman. He has not supplanted C.J. Anderson, fantasy owners, so don't email me. But he will be used in a way that could be surprising as this unique home run type threat.
All right, Troy.
We'll save Monte Ball for another day,
Yeah.
but you got to wonder what's going to happen to him in life.
We'll see you out there tomorrow. What time are they practicing tomorrow against the 49ers?
Around 11:30, I think they're going to get started. But no pads either day, no full pads.
Really?
They'll go shells and then shorts, but they
that'll
really
cut,
want a concentrated effort of no pads.
Yeah, that'll cut down on the fighting probably.
Yeah.
Well, maybe anyway.
I can't wait to see the two guys with three names. That would be Joe Don Duncan and Jim Tom Sulla.
Sula. All right, guys. See you.
Troy, thanks. We'll see you tomorrow.